Have you ever worked for something so hard and wanted it so much, that no matter what you did, it just kept running away from you? It almost seemed like it was unachievable, that you were never going to have it. And there's other things that you didn't even work hard for and you achieved them. And other people were so surprised that it came so easy for you. Well, the reason this happens is it's called the gap. Let me explain. See, everything has a gap, a starting point and an ending point. And in between is a real secret to getting what you want, but it's not what you think. It's not it's not exactly what you want that's the secret or what it is that you do to get it. It's how you fill the gap. Let me start with sharing a story. I lived in Colorado for probably like over 10 years. And one of my pastimes that I loved was riding my ATV. Now, we lived in Colorado up about 11,000 feet elevation, up in Breckenridge, Colorado. Beautiful out there if you ever have visited. Now, one of my pastimes, I had a ATV and I would go up the mountainside, specifically in about February or March when there was a lot of snow. It was just fun. And usually I rode alone. So there was this one pass called Independent Pass. It was probably a couple thousand feet up incline up to the very top of the peak. So I got to the trail. It was all covered in white snow. So I unloaded my trail and then my ATV and started going up the trail. It was fresh snow, so I knew I was the only one there. So I started a little bit later that day. It was about like 1 or 2 o'clock. So by the time I got to the top of the peak, it was about 3 or 4 o'clock. It was just going to be sunsetting. So as I was driving up, which was pretty gnarly, but I got to the top and then I unpacked my lunch and I started eating it. And then all of a sudden, from the corner of my eye, I saw this gentleman running down, exhausted, just running, just wet, covered in snow, because it was probably like a foot or two of snow at the top of the peak, Independent Pass. So when I saw him, I obviously got on my ATV and went met him halfway, and then he was just. I mean, he was exhausted. He was screaming. I didn't understand what he was saying. And as soon as I got to him, he told me that he drove his truck up to the top of the pass. He actually came in a different way that I did. That was more kind of connected to the town where he was from. So he came up, but however, he went off-roading and the truck was stuck. And he's been up there for about 3 hours. There was nobody up there, and he had his 3 kids and his wife in the car. So then I get on my ATV, he jumps on the back, we go about 10 minutes or so, and then I get to the point where he is with his wife. And his wife, they're all inside. A couple kids are crying because they've been there. It's getting cold, right? The sun is setting. So then what we start doing is we start dislodging them, right? And I didn't have any tools because I wasn't prepared to dig someone out in, about like it was about a foot and a half of snow on the trail. And he had this luxury SUV, which was not made for obviously snow. But I'm sure he was actually visiting later, I found out. So then what we did was we jumped on my back, and there was a cabin that was not too far along from when I went up the trail to go look for some tools or some things that we can dislodge him, right? So we turned around and got on the back and we drove down. It was pretty gnarly ride down because it was starting to get icy because the temperature was dropping, right? So then when we got to this cabin, usually up in the mountains, sometimes there's these old cabins that people use just for, like hikers and, as you can go and use them. They're unlocked and sometimes they leave tools in there. So I went in there and sure enough, there was a small little shovel. I mean, it was probably, like probably like a foot and a half to 2 feet, foot shovel. So I grabbed that shovel. He jumped on the back. We went up again, up the mountain and worked hard to dig him out. And finally, we dug him out, turned his ATV around, and then he went on his way. And I tell you that story because to get to the top of this pass, right, there's multiple ways, but there was 2 ways, right? One way I knew that I could go up this road on my ATV and get there pretty fairly quickly and then get back down to the bottom, right? Now he went up a unknown road, right? So it took me about an hour and a half to go up and down, pretty quick, right? For him, His trip was an all-day trip, right? Because he went through a pass that was unknown to him, right? And then he got stuck. And he probably would have stayed there stuck on that road if it wasn't for me that I just happened to be there that day and his family, because there's no cell phone reception up there. And he might not have seen another person up there to help him get unstuck, right? So his was a whole day endeavor, right? So in that story, there's a couple lessons. One, there is multiple roads to get to the same point because we met at the same point, and it can take us different time links, right? Now, the only difference is that the gap, right? So the distance is the same from the bottom of the mountain to wherever you are right now to where it is that you want to be to the very top of the peak. There's different roads, right? Some people have traveled that road multiple times like I did, right? And then other people's like him, like a gentleman that I met with his family, that was the very first time. So there was a lot of struggle, right? So I tell you that story because sometimes when we go after a new goal, maybe it's a business, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's new financial peak that you want to reach, right? Or you want to break free from wherever it is that you are to your next level, right? We get really frustrated because, like that gentleman that was stuck in the rut in about a foot and a half of snow with the temperature dropping, right? We start losing hope, right? But what we have to do is not only focus on our final destination, right? But we also want to discover like how can we actually, kind of minimize that gap, right? Maybe find another person that can help you, right? That's traveled that path, right? Or maybe, the more times you try something, or, now I use the word try, and I know there's certain language is very important, right? But you want to do things when you try something, you want to be really clear about, when we try you have to go all in, right? Like if it's going up the road for him, like you have to go all the way in, so you don't just want to try or dabble into something. So you want to make sure that when you're doing it, you're fully involved, but you don't want to get wrapped up in that there's only one path to get to where it is that you want, right? Just like at the very top of the mountain. I knew an easier path. He took the harder path, right? So what we want to do is really not get attached to the way that we're going to achieve our goal, right? Very important. So the very first step to achieve what it is that you want, first you want to know where you're at, right? You want to take a self-assessment, have some clarity on where it is that where you are right now, right? Now, you want to identify where it is that you want to go, right? Whatever that peak is for you, right? If it's a financial peak, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's business, maybe it's life, whatever that is. So you want to identify that clearly. So now you have your A and your B, right? Now that gap. Let's talk about that with the story, right? There's multiple ways, as we know, to get to the top of the peak, right? So you want to be able to, once you start on that journey, right, you don't want to get fixed and just stay on your journey, because what's going to happen is you're going to start taking steps, right? Because you're going to create that plan. But if you stay rigid with your plan, you're going to be like that gentleman. And he got stuck on this road, right? And a foot and a half of snow, and he probably would have been covered, in snow because there was a huge snowstorm coming. And he was rigid, right? But luckily, he was able to get out and look for some help, right? So we always want to be able to know that there's different paths, right? You've probably heard of the saying, all roads lead to Rome. And the reason that specific phrase exists is because, there are many different ways to reach the same goal or conclusion, right? So the more things that you have done, right, the smaller the gap, the easier it gets for you, right? So it isn't so much of just designing those steps, but it's taking action, right? So to start decreasing that gap and make things more achievable for you, the very first thing you want to do is define your starting point, like I mentioned, and then to define your ending point. Now, this is very important. The third step is that you want to let go of the outcome of your goal. You don't want to, once you define it, you know what it is, right? You don't have to stay focused on it, right? Meaning now it comes into the present moment. Now that you identify those steps that you're going to take, you want to focus on those first steps. And after every single step, you want to use that feedback, right? Because action, right, whatever it is that you do, right, then you want to pause and see, is this working? Is this not working? Is this getting me closer? Like, that gentleman up at the top of the mountain up in Colorado, he was stuck there 2 or 3 hours until he went out to look for help. If he would have waited up a little bit longer, he would have been stuck up there. So you don't want to be stuck in the snowstorm, right? At the very top of the mountain, trying to achieve what it is that you want, so you want to look at your feedback. What's working, what's not, what can you adjust, and then take action again, right? So that's very important. So you want to start moving towards what it is that your goal is, and to decrease that gap, find different ways to get it, right? For a very long time, part of my personality is that I am, up to now, I was a perfectionist, right? And at times I would get stuck because I wanted things to work out in a certain expected way, right? Like I would plan every single step and I wanted things to be the way they were. Now, that word want is it actually, language is very important. So I always wanted something, meaning I always wanted something to work out, right? So what that means is I'm coming from a place of lack, right? Like I want something, right? Well, instead of doing that, we want to come from a point from empowerment, right? And just taking action, right? Taking action with confidence that we're going to take that first step, and then also expect that we might have to adjust, right? And to adjust our step, that's where the power is. See, you see a lot of people achieving great things, right? And if you ask them, and I have conversations with them, right? And they say the more things you do, the easier it gets. Now, hear that again. The more things you do, the easier it gets, right? So if you want to decrease that gap, and if you look at the things that have come easy to you, it's not by chance, right? It's because you've worked or you've done it multiple times, right? For me, I run competitively, and the very first race I did not as good as I wanted to, right? Because I was looking for that perfectionist. I was trying to beat everybody that was running around me. And that's, if you ever ran competitive or if you've ever been sports, it's probably the dumbest thing you can do is try to compete against everybody in a specific race. And competition is good, right? But because I was trying to beat that person in front of me, I had no idea how many races they ran, and they were much faster. So by the time that race was over, I was exhausted because I was chasing someone that had ran 12 times, 10 times, and this was my first race, right? So what I have learned is that what you want to do is your own competition is that first single step, right? It's you yesterday, right? So what you want to do is start taking action in whatever it is, right? You first, of course, you want to have a few steps, a plan outline, but know that plan is going to change, right? Those steps are going to change as you measure it. The last thing you want is to be stuck at the top of the mountain like the gentleman was for hours with the storm coming down, with his family in the truck, the temperature dropping, and frustrated. And so you don't want to get stuck at the top of the mountain all by yourself, right? So you want to find different ways, different avenues on how to get there, and it's all based on your action, right? Not somebody else's, right? I mean, if you look at somebody else, how they achieve their goals, you can use that as a model, but also know that you might have to adjust, right? You might have to look at your feedback because it's very individual to you, right? So in order for you to minimize the gap and get the things that you want in life faster, well, the very first thing, again, to summarize, is you want to know where you're currently at, right? And then you want to know what is your goal, right? Where is it you want to go, right? Then you create that distance. And then you really want to set aside that goal and not really focus on it. You want to detach yourself from that outcome. And then your next step is very important, is you want to focus on those steps, on the actions that you're going to do, with the knowing that you're going to have to adjust them after you take those first couple steps, right? So know that in order to achieve what it is that you want in life, you got to take action and measure it. And then you might have to adjust the course because nothing is a straight line. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me, it helps other viewers to achieve what they want in life, to gain more clarity, and to really feel empowered, to really become free to achieve the life that they want. So again, subscribe to the channel, share it if you know someone that might benefit from it. And I would love to hear in the comments, what are those things that you have achieved in your life? And if you have, achieve certain things in your life by the more actions you take, right? So I would love to hear any feedback in your comments. Please comment down below and subscribe to the channel and like as well. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.